Hi friends, welcome back to Arc Tutorials. We are continuing with our Angular 9 full tutorial series, and in today's episode we will learn about Angular HTTP client post method. You would have interacted with many web applications where you would have seen or used forms. The forms can be of any type. It can be a contact us, can be a login, can be a registration form. In 99.99% times, each of these forms will use post method. The reason I say 99.99% is because you can also use forms with get method, a classic example of which is Google search. So Google search is also a kind of a form which has one input type equal to text. But when you hit submit, you can see the value entered, which is a get. So this is one of the examples. So rarely you will use, whenever you have search kind of thing, you would use get, but otherwise it's usually a post form. We'll learn all about it in today's episode. Welcome back. My name is Sridhar. I bring over 10 years of experience as a full stack developer. I'm here to share my knowledge with you on the modern web technology stack, and I'm here also here to learn from you. So during the course of this tutorial series, if you have any doubts, I encourage you to ask me in the uh, comment section below. I'll be happy to help you. I'm putting in a lot of hard work in bringing these tutorials to you. So please help me, support me by encouraging and subscribing to my channel by liking the videos. Thank you in advance. Like I said, this is part of the Angular 9 full tutorial series. We have around 55 tutorials now in the playlist. If you really want to learn and master Angular 9, please go through that list. Ask me if you have any doubts in those tutorials. The playlist link is in the description box below, so make sure you check it out. All right, so in this feature series, we are learning about Angular HTTP, where we are learning how to make HTTP calls, make a request, process the response. So far we have seen observables, we have seen dependency injection, services, HTTP client, and in the previous episode we learned about HTTP client get method. Today we are focusing on HTTP client post method. But let me also tell you that this tutorial will make use of JSON server to mock our endpoint. We'll use observables, dependency injection, HTTP client. So all of this I have covered in the previous last three tutorials. So make sure you check them out in the series if you want to continuity of the tutorials. Just to give you a quick overview of HTTP client. HTTP client is used for performing all the HTTP requests and responses in Angular application. The HTTP client service is available in the package Angular Common HTTP. In order to use HTTP client, remember that we have to import HTTP client module, without which it will not work. So this is absolutely important, mandatory, and a lot of developers will make mistake here. So make sure you don't do that. All right. So like I said, common examples of post are login form, create new user, contact us. These are all some of the use cases of where you use HTTP client post method. Or in other words, I can say that whenever we want to submit the data to an endpoint in a secured way, the data should be hidden. We use a post method. All right. So like I said, we'll make an API call whenever we want to submit the data to an endpoint. That is called the post method. The syntax is the method we'll call is dot post, and we have to provide two parameters. One is the endpoint or the API URL. The other is the body. We can also pass options like headers, params. We can also pass response type with credentials, etc. The response that we get from the post call is always an observable, which means that we have to subscribe to it in order to process the data. So that's important. Remember that you don't miss out on that. So whenever we make any HTTP calls via HTTP client, the response type is always an observable. So we have to subscribe to it so that we can process the data. In the previous episodes, we learned in detail about observable, how to process it. So make sure you check it out if you have missed it out. All right, so HTTP client post method options. We can pass headers, we can pass params, we can pass response type. We'll explore all of that in detail, but the idea of this tutorial is to help you make a post calls, HTTP post calls. We'll do it in 6 simple steps, right? First, we will add and import the HTTP client module in our app module. Second, we will import our HTTP client into our service or a component wherever you want to make a HTTP call. But it's always a good practice to do that in services, because services, it becomes reusable, it's easy to maintain, it's easy to share the methods and classes and variables between different components. So we import it into the service, then we inject the HTTP client into the constructor and create an instance of it. Then we will write a method which will implement the post call. Finally, we will import this service into our component class and then make use of that method. So these are 6 simple steps. We'll walk through it one by one now in hands-on. Again, I'll request you, the best way to do is practice with me, code with me, take any example, start typing code, or just follow the code that I am writing. Just try and type it as it is. So that way you get hands-on experience. Let's start. So like I said, we will be using a mock server to use it. So I am using JSON server. I have covered that in the previous episode when we did HTTP client basics, also in the get method. So I'm using JSON server to create a mock server. Alternatively, you can also create any endpoint using my maybe Java Spring microservices, Node Express, ASP.NET, any language, it's fine. All we are requiring here is an endpoint through which we can hit and make a post call. I'll be covering how to install Express, Node, all that in the later tutorials, but for now, let's just use JSON server. So to show you how it works first, what I'm going to do, I'm going to use a Postman. So this is another tool to test APIs. So let's first, now that I've started my server, I will go to the browser and hit contacts, and it will give me the list of contacts. It is there. So there are 4 contacts right now. If I see my application, I see there are 4 contacts that are returned here, right? So now I'm going to use Postman first to insert that value. So my keys are first name and last name. So I'm going to make first name and hit send. So I see that I get 200 OK, 201, which is request is created, right? So 200 means status OK, 201 means request has been fulfilled and a new resource has been created. Okay, so 201 is a good feedback now. So now I'll go back and request this. So now you see it created a new resource with the ID 5, and in the UI I see the 5th record added. So this is the post using Postman. Now we will simulate it in our code. So for that, if you remember, let me make some notes here for you. Let me see if I have otherwise. Okay, so let me make some notes on HTTP client post method. Right. So first thing, we are still using, we will use the contact component which we created in previous tutorial. So make sure you have seen and your code is up to date with it. Okay. So this is our contacts component. Let's see it how it looks. So this is a simple contacts component where we implemented a get call and we are getting the details. That's all, simple, nothing much. Also, important things to note. As part of that 6-step series, if you remember, I told you all of these 6 steps. So first, let me know. So in app module, we imported HTTP client module. This is the most important thing. So we did it already in the last episode, but I'll show you here. So you see, we have import HTTP client module from Angular common and HTTP, and we imported that in our imports array, which is here, right? So this is done. So the first step is this is done with the first step. The second step, says we need to import HTTP client in our service. So remember we also created the contact service where we did a service.ts file. We created a get method call. Okay, so let me just show you here once. So contact, so here we see that we had written get contacts, which does a headers append, and it's returning the http client dot get, right? So it is just returning the contacts. So it's making a get call and returning us the details. So that's all it does. So let's close some of these which we don't need. And yep. Okay, so we have the get call. So that part is done. So we created the import the HTTP client. You can see it here. We imported the HTTP client and we injected that into the constructor to create an instance. And using that instance, we are calling the get method. So this is the step number 2 and step number 3, which is import the HTTP client in our service and inject the HTTP client in our constructor. So this is what we had done so far. We imported it and we created an instance. Now we will write a method, which is this fourth step for a post call. So here I'm going to say create contact, right? Simple method, nothing complicated. We'll keep it simple for now. Like I said, we will keep it simple for learning. We will make complex use cases as we proceed in building an app. Okay, so the idea is to learn, so keep it simple. So now we are creating a method here, and here we'll say first return this dot http client dot post. Now in post, what is the endpoint we are doing? So we'll say http localhost 3000 slash contacts, right? But remember, get does not require any other parameter, but post will require. So I will say here resource. I'll say create body, create resource, and we will pass it in the method. Okay. So now we are saying we are creating a new, and where we are saying for creating a new resource, we will send that JSON, right? And that is what this is. Or you can say create body or whatever name you want to give, right? Create JSON body, or it can be any variable. All we are passing here is a JSON attributes from the form. So that's all we need from creating in the service, right? So, so we created a method implemented post method. Parameters required are parameters required is an endpoint or a URL, whatever you call it, and then body, which is the resource for creating new one. So now let's go to in template. Let's create the form, right? Let's go to contacts.component and we'll get rid of it here. And instead we'll just say h3 create new contact, right? So create new contact. This is where we'll create a new contact. I'm not going to type all of it again because if you remember, we did already that in login. We learned that in template, right? So if you remember, um, let's close it here. So we will reuse the template driven forms or reactive forms. Um, we'll reuse we will reuse right the template driven forms. um, we we get a form object, right, or form data that we capture it, right. Let me show you that first. So here I'm going to go to login. Okay, so start typing something. This is password, some other thing, email, right? And you can select male, female, whatever that is. The idea is we learned about template driven forms, and when you submit, it would give a form data, right? So let's see that once. It can be anything, so don't worry about it. Um, right? You submit and you get the form data, right? So we will use that response. So we will think that we have got the response, right? And how do we do that? In the contacts.ts, what we are going to do here, we are going to call it, we are just going to implement a submit button, right? Here we are going to call it, and here we are going to say on click, add new contact. Okay, add new contact, right? So reuse the code here from template driven forms or reactive forms, right? That we have already learned it, right? Please refer previous tutorials where we created the form and form data body and captured form data, right? So this is just a pure assumption that you will know how to reuse. Don't worry about it. Don't worry if you don't get this piece. um, I will start a CRUD tutorial with live example soon. Okay, for now just assume that. So I'm going to go back to my contacts, right? So I'm going to go back to my contacts, and here let's give it a break. Okay, so this is where we will reuse that particular piece of code, and we will just say that we have a method. When I click on it, it should create a new resource for me, right? So in the component, I'm going to implement this method and say create or add new contact. Okay, this is the same method which I'm giving the name here on the submit button, right? So here what we'll do, for now, I'm just going to mock that uh, form data, right? Mocking the form data that we will get from the form, right? So here I'm going to say new form data equal to, so here I'm going to take the same form data here, ID, first name, last name. So I'm going to say ID as 6, and then I'm going to say first name as say HT, or let's say Raj. And then I'm going to say last name Kumar. Okay, so I've got a sample data, right? So now I'm saying that this is what I will get when I implement a form, right? And then what I'll do, and if you see here, we already imported the import contact service. We created instance. So let's copy this instance, and we will say this dot contact service dot create contact. This is a method. Now it takes a create body, which is nothing but our new form data, right? And so this has got it. Now we will say dot subscribe, since we are subscribing to it, and then we will say data, right? And here we will say um, let's say we are going to show a success message, right? I'm going to use ngf equal to message true. If message true, contact created successfully. Okay, so let's take this and define it here and initialize it to false. Okay, So we have a variable. What we will do, if the data is true, then we will say if when we get the data, usually we'll draw something like dot map or dot error, but here I'm just capturing for now and I'm putting it message equal to true, and it would be this dot. Okay, so we'll also console log dot data. Okay, so this is what we will get from the observable. That's what we are processing, and we'll just show that message for now, right? So this is what it is. I'll just open the console, right? So I know we are doing 6 things, so stay with me. It looks, so now you see it processed, and you see here Raj, right? So it reloaded for us and it gave us the message, right? So since there is a dynamic binding, the moment we added it, it already created it. Now, if you go to contacts and see that, we see it's the same value which we passed it here in the form data, right? So this is an example. So classic example is how you process that data and how we process it. Like once you get the form data, how do you pass it as part of the post? And then how do you reflect it back into the UI, right? So this is one of the examples, simple examples to get you started. In most cases, it will be little complicated, like you will have authentication, you will have JWT auth tokens, you'll have a lot of headers that you want to pass. But the idea here is to get you started. So start with it, right? So mock the form data, call the HTTP post method. You should see the status. You should see the we should we should see new resource created, right? So that's the point, that's the learning of this particular post, that we are trying to add data using post, which is what we have done it in our contact service. So we pass through an endpoint and we have a JSON body, right? That we pass it from our component. And in the component, usually we will have it through the form data. So you can have it something like, if you want to extend it, you can just simply check out. Let me quickly show you how to do that as well. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to quickly copy the entire thing and as it is, so that we faster the process. In the contacts, go here, and here I'm going to, instead of this, right, I'm going to implement the data. So I'm going to just read the values here. And so if you, like I said, the best way to get you started is to do a mock data. All right. So here I'm going to pass that data. I'm going to receive that data in the form, right? And how do we process it? Form.value.id, and we'll need first name, last name, and we'll need these three, right? So we'll need ID, first name and last name, that we'll get from the form, right? Now this is where I'm making it dynamic data from form. So this is the mock data, right? Uh, and now I'm making it dynamic. But if you want to, it's up to you basically, but usually in most real cases we'll have from the form. So I'm trying to show you how to do that. In the template, go ahead and copy the form again. I'm not typing it for you. It would be, but let me show you how to do that. So let's get rid of this code here, right? And we'll have a form, and we will close this form here, and we'll need three input types, and we'll need a button, right? So we will have our form here, right? Input type equal to text, input type equal to text. This I'm going to call it first name. Similarly, I'm going to call it last name, right? And I'll say this also is required, and I'm going to create one more ID here, and I'm going to call it ID, right? So all three fields are required, and I will put some validations. Again, we have done all of that in the form tutorial, so I'm not really going to do that here. So instead, we'll just copy from there. It makes it much easier to just copy paste. So you have the disable login form. This form should be the same name. So I'm going to say add new contact form, copy the same name, copy the same name, and I'm saying we'll remove this now because we don't need that. Add new contact. So if you see, this is a template variable and I'm saying it's an ng form. So similarly, you have to pass the same name here in the submit form. And here the name was add new contact, right? Add new contact. We have ID, we have first name, we have last name, we have a button, right? Let's see this in action. So this is what it is. Instead, I'm going to class equal to container. I'm just beautifying a little bit so it's much readable, right? So maybe I can throw in a quick forms to style it up. Again, don't try and type it yourself. Try and use it as much as you can, so that way, you know, copy this form. So don't try, because the idea is to learn here, and I'm doing it since I know it for sure. So you guys may take time. Take it easy. Even if you don't see a beautiful form, it's okay for you. um, the idea here is to learn, so focus on that part only. And I'll copy these variable names, put it to, okay, so, or rather, let me keep it simple for you. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to copy one form and I'm going to modify that here. Just copy this and put it here. I don't need any help text for now, and we'll do the same for the three, right? Okay, so other way of doing it is you can create this form beforehand, and come prepared, if that helps you in any way. Alrighty, so here I have my div container. I have my three labels, so I'm just going to move them into respective. Okay, so we are moving them here, and here I'll say enter last name. Sorry friends, I'm just trying to make it much beautiful so you get an inspiration. Otherwise, we could have just started coding, but it's good that, we want to see it beautiful form so you get some motivation. I think I'm sure you're following it. Okay, enter ID. Now we have form first name and we have our form ready. So if you see here now, we have a little beautiful form than previously what we had, right? We have enter ID, enter first name, enter last name, and we have the disabled submit button. Okay, all right. I'm just giving some empty so we have some space. Okay, so we have this form. Let's fill that now. So we have the form. Let's collect it here. Go to component. We are getting the form, and we will copy this and now make it dynamic. So here I'm going to say form.value.id, form.value.first name, and then I'll say form.value.last name. So see, now my JSON object has become a real-time dynamically new, which is coming dynamic values from. There is no more static value. It will come from the form itself, right? So let's test it out. So I'm going to add 6, and I'm going to add, say, Suresh. I'll say Ramesh. I'm going to enter. Okay, looks like there is some issue. Let's see. It should, okay, there is some error. Let's see. Okay, so I get the values, but there is some error which says HTTP failed request with status 500. Okay, okay, let's see that data now, why it failed. Okay, so it made a request, it made a request and it failed. Let me clear the network tab now. So it made a request and we are getting 300 contacts, internal server. Okay, so 300 internal server. Let's see that why it failed. Um, so what we will do here first, let's see what data was sent, right? We can see the data. It says ID 6, first name, last name, right? And the value that we require is also first name. Our ID is small, okay? First name, last name, and it should be contacts. And let's see why it failed. Suresh, okay, we got the view source. Okay, so then we have to send the headers also, right? Since it's an encoded URL where we are saying that it's of type JSON. So we need to put some headers here now. So we can go to our component service or contact service. And just like how we appended before, we can use the same and we will say let's pass them again to the here we can pass the options. So we'll say headers equal to HTTP headers. Okay, so let's see. Now it says 304. Let's build it. Let's take the form again and say 7 test. Let enter. Okay, it still says 201, so which means it's created. Now it's reading the data. So we should see test here, right? So let me show you that again. So here now we are going to, so what was missing was content type slash JSON was missing. So I added in the headers and it worked. So let's try it here. Let's say mark. So I'm hitting enter. Now you should contact created successfully. And now it will reload and we see mark added here, right? So that is how this entire output has worked for with HTTP client post, where we have seen how to do it with static code and how to do it with dynamic code, right? And we have modified our contact service to also pass headers where we are passing as application JSON. We are passing the dynamic data and we are updating the view based on it. Now, similarly, if you go to contacts, you should see that these are updated now with 8 that we added, right? That's what is reflecting in our list of contacts. So this is a classic example of how you go about business in terms of using a HTTP post. Now, I will request you take it slow since we have covered quite a lot of things, a lot of concepts in this tutorial. Then I would say slow down and start typing or slash coding step by step. Start with mock data first and then grow into building a form um, and then make it a dynamic form creation, right? So the important thing here is have patience. um, Buzz me if you see any issues with your code. I will jump in, I'll help you. When to help you, right? Thank you so much for joining in today's episode. It was awesome coding today. In next episode, we will extend something similar on the same lines. It would be same. Where we will learn about HTTP put endpoint. Thank you so much for joining. I hope you learn from this. Do share your feedback on this tutorial, and I am waiting eagerly to hear from you on your comments, any queries, any doubts. I can't wait to see what you have built. Thank you so much.